Huh? CO.
Wrong with this.
CO, HC, and NOx. Right? Okay, now I always like to explain it like this. Hydrocarbons is unburned fuel. It likes to get married to two molecules, like a hydrogen, H2O, basically. See, so now H2O is water. What am I saying? CO2, two molecules of oxygen and one molecule of carbon. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so if we got one molecule of carbon and it's married to oxygen.
We're going to remember it.
Okay, we're going here. Here's oxygen.
We're going to remember it all.
Oxygen, and here's carbon. This is what is the optimum burn. Carbon dioxide is what you'll get that way. Now, do you guys know what dihydrogen monoxide is?
Nope.
Huh? What?
It's like two hydrogens, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, four oxygens.
So what is that? Two hydrogen is an oxygen.
It's a hydrogen.
Two hydrogens and an oxygen is what?
Dihydrogen.
Dihydrogen monoxide. Dihydrogen monoxide. There's a website that you can go to that talks about how dangerous dihydrogen monoxide is, how many people it kills every year, and how it corrodes metal, and there's just all kinds of awful stuff that it does.
It does?
Yeah. You know what it is? It's water. Dihydrogen monoxide is water. So I just do that to clear my head so I won't make stupid mistakes up here. Okay. Carbon. Every carbon molecule likes to get married to two oxygen molecules.
Every one of them.
Every one of them. That's what happens. Whenever the oxygen is getting together with the carbon, you got fire. Basically. And you got expansion because of the heat and all that. You see where I'm going? All right. Now, what if there's so much carbon going in there that it can only get married to one molecule of oxygen? What do you got then?
You're running rich.
Running rich, and you're producing CO. So CO means that you're running slightly rich, right? Got it? All right.
Running rich.
Huh?
What's wrong with running rich?
Running rich means that you're not going to get good fuel economy, and your catalytic converter is going to heat up, and it's all kinds of horrible stuff. And CO is something you can't smell, you can't see, but you will die if you breathe it.
Oh, really?
It's extremely poisonous. I mean, don't think you're going to breathe CO and get high and have a good time, because you ain't. All you're going to do is get died. It will kill you. It will kill you dead. I mean, if I was to pump this room full of carbon monoxide, it'd kill every one of us in short order. That's why they got carbon monoxide. That's why they got carbon monoxide detectors in some people's houses. So if their gas stove is not working right, it'll make carbon monoxide and mess them up. All right.
We
So
play a game.
what if there's so much? Listen. What if there's so much carbon in there, hydrocarbon in there, that there's some of them don't get any oxygen? Then what you got coming out the back is HC, and what does that look like? It either looks like soot, which is black smoke, or it looks like raw gas that you can hold together and splatter on your hand. Okay. All right. So make sure you understand that hydrocarbons is the unburned fuel. If it only gets one oxygen molecule, it has burned, but it hasn't burned completely, and so you're winding up with CO, which is poison. And what we're trying to do, the whole deal about the 14.7 to 1 air-fuel ratio is that's the cleanest burn that's available. That's where you're going to get two molecules of oxygen to one molecule of carbon, and that's why we're shooting for that. Yes, and this is an easy question here. Easy second part of the question: what are the harmless, beneficial two gases?
CO2.
What else? What else do we get?
Water vapor.
Water vapor is, yeah, and when do you see that water vapor particularly? When you first fire it up is the only time you're going to see that. But, you know, that's what I'm saying. The EPA nowadays is trying to say CO2 and water vapor are both greenhouse gases, and we need to stop making them. But every time you breathe out CO2 and water vapor. Every time our car breathes out, it breathes out CO2 and water vapor. If our car is breathing out the same thing we're breathing out, that ain't a problem, is it? I'm just sorry, it's not. You know. All right. What does the exhaust gas recirculation system control? Exhaust gas recirculation is when you take some of the exhaust gas and run it back through the mix. What does it control? You know what NOx is? N-O-X. Okay, how much of the air that we're breathing is oxygen? How much of it?
12%.
21% is oxygen. 21%. Okay, 78% is nitrogen, and 1% is trace elements. Okay, so you got 78% and 21%. This nitrogen and the oxygen that is in the combustion chamber, obviously there's going to be a lot of nitrogen in there too, right? So when you go above 2,500 degrees in a combustion chamber, the oxygen and nitrogen get together, and we really don't want that. It won't always be NO1. It may be NO1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There may be, it's all different ones. That's why they put NOx. That little X means that it can be any number. But we call it NOx. They call it NOx like that, you know. And one of those compounds is actually the laughing gas or the nitrous that you run through your race car and all that kind of stuff. But only a tiny bit of it, so it ain't doing you no good anyway. All right, so what we're going to do there, remember, greater than 2,500 degrees causes that. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. During the course of that burn, if you could measure that with a thermometer, you see 2,500 degrees in a combustion chamber. You don't want that. All right, so what you're going to do to keep it below that is you're going to pump some gas in there that won't burn. Now, that is actually, you know, you might say, well, that's counterintuitive. It sounds like it'll rob you a little bit of your power. Well, it allows you for more spark advance because you're not running as hot, you see. And one of the reasons you have to, you know, recharge your spark a little bit is because if it runs too hot, you'll ping. You know what I mean? And in some cases, if one is set up for EGR and the EGR doesn't work, you'll get a ping. Ping, you know, they call them valve clatter, but that ain't what it is. It's basically the gas line.
So that's what the old rednecks call it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they call it because they really didn't know what it was. I mean, the noise down in there. But so the oxides of nitrogen are combated by this EGR system. And some cars don't have EGR. I was talking about it the other day. My yellow Jeep, my 2001 Jeep, they were able to satisfy the NOx emission requirements of the EPA without putting EGR on it, so they didn't put EGR on it. That little Escort out there that we've got, the little green station wagon that we got, it came without EGR. See what I mean? So you don't have to have EGR on every vehicle. But most vehicles do. You know, the one we were working on yesterday has EGR. You remember how I would put it in gear and I'd give it the gas and the EGR would just, you know, start recirculating exhaust gas. Then here's another thing else. I'm going to tell you this as part of engine performance. If EGR is flowing when you're idling, you're going to idle rough. It doesn't flow at wide open throttle. It doesn't flow at idle. Remember that. It does not flow at wide open throttle. It does not flow at idle. It goes. You drop your EGR goes away when you're wide open, pulling up a hill. That's been the conventional with them. Used to, it would flow anytime the engine. They had a little vacuum switch, little vacuum switch. Had its little wax element in the water, and when the water heated up, it would let vacuum go to the EGR valve, but only when you had the throttle crack. So you had ported vacuum coming from the carburetor through this thing to the EGR valve, and when you're driving down the road, when you were, you know, off idle, you were going to have EGR. And it also depends on exhaust back pressure. Here's another thing. Out there, you can actually be measuring your EGR flow, looking at it, and I can just give it gas without a load on the engine, and it won't flow that way, typically. But if you put it in gear,
Because it has no back pressure.
yeah, if you put it in gear and there's a load on the engine, that's when it's flowing because that's when it's hottest. Now let me ask you this: when I'm just giving it the gas, and I'm not loaded, my ignition timing goes way up to like 50 degrees or something like that. But if I'm loaded, my ignition timing is lower, right? Because if it doesn't go lower whenever you're loaded, you're going to ping your labor knot because of the pressure, extra added pressure in the fluid. Okay, let me keep going because I'm getting sidetracked here. What is the exhaust gas recirculation system control? NOx, NOx. What's the optimum air fuel mixture for the cleanest burn? I've already said that. Somebody tell me. 14.701. That's called stoichiometric. STOICIOMETRIC. That is a physics term. That's basically the balance where everything burns the cleanest, right? Why was it necessary to remove lead from gasoline in the early 1970s?
It'd kill you.
Actually, lead clogs the catalytic converter. Now, what did they put the lead in there to begin with for? Make the engine last longer. It would coat the valves. It was good for the engine. You might even see them stickers even on them old gas pumps. So this is a motor vehicle that contains lead.
Let me ask a dumb question. What's the catalytic converter?
Catalytic converter actually it's got a ceramic honeycomb in it, and I've got one up there cut so you can see. Right here.
I know, I've seen them when I used to work at Big L.
I'll point this out as we go. Well, Jacob probably hasn't seen it. Okay, see that right there? See that little ceramic honeycomb? I'm going to shine a light on it so our camera can see it. a little ceramic honeycomb in there, and it's going to align those gases. And around the outside, you got a vermiculite blanket, and impregnated in there, you've got all this cesium, and you got platinum, and you got palladium, you got rhodium, and that is a catalyst that takes you got actually a light-off catalyst that handles your oxides of nitrogen that manages to make it out of the combustion chamber. It actually takes those and separates them. And then when it goes in there, the hydrocarbon and the carbon monoxide I was talking about, you listen, guys, listen up. The hydrocarbon and the carbon monoxide that goes through that back catalytic converter, it adds an additional molecule of oxygen where it's lacking. And so that when you got CO and HC coming into that back cat, after it's already gone through this one, and then it turns that into CO2. So it's going to take HC and CO and turn it into CO2. Now, a catalyst, the definition of a catalyst is what? Does anybody know what a definition of a catalyst is? The dictionary definition of a catalyst is something that causes a change without changing itself. See, the converter is not changed by this process, but the gases going through it are changed. And when they first started trying to make catalytic converters, somebody put bolts in there. Whenever they first started trying to make catalytic converters, they were saying that nobody was going to be able to do it. And they found out because it was so hard to make this clay, this little ceramic honeycomb. They were thinking, ain't no way they're going to be able to make them mass produced. Well, they have this clay over in Georgia. Is about the only place in the world, from what it's one article I read. The only place they have is clay is over in Georgia, somewhere. And all the catalytic converters have that. But anyway, there's a lot of precious metals in there too. Now, if that thing overheats, if it overheats and it starts giving trouble, then you're going to have some issues there. Put it down and plug.
Was that already unplugged?
I don't know. Maybe it was. All right. I don't see that anything has died, so I guess I'll be okay. All right. Now then. But that was a good question that he asked there. It launched me into a discussion, but that's what we're here for. All right, the vehicle, let me see. What vehicle emission does the evaporative system control?
Water vapor.
Hydrocarbons. You're not going to control water vapor, except with the PCB system. All right. Hydrocarbons. Now, how did it do that? Okay, look here. You got a gas tank, right? And all gas tanks are made. You might even notice that you'll see them made like that. Wes, you ever notice that? Mm-hmm. They're made like that on the top. They're not just, typically they're going to have it fixed where there's an airspace. And whenever the gas goes in there, most of the time they got a little hose that sticks down through the hose that you fill up with, so that whenever the gas comes up to here, it clicks off. Because they want to have a bunch of airspace in there. All right, up in the very top of it, let's say, we're going to simplify this as much as we can. You're going to take a piece of hose, a little vapor hose, and it's going to go and it's going to store those vapors in a carbon fiber canister. So those vapors are actually trapped in there and they can't go anywhere. They actually evaporate in gasoline instead of coming out into the air. The gas cap is sealed nowadays. All right, where it goes down and it's stored in there. And then your engine, there's a vacuum line that goes through a valve to your engine, and your engine actually sucks that out of there. It purges that. There's various times. Years ago, it used to just purge when EGR was flowing, which was about the same time everything going on. Now I can purge anytime.
People they fill it all the way up with the sucking gas there. And
yes, it would.
It purges it would make it idle higher.
Not idle higher, but it's idle rougher. He's making an extremely good point. Gasoline liquid, if it sloshes because you get it too full, and it sloshes up, or you pack the gas tank up, or you can pack it up on some gas tanks to where liquid fuel will make it past this little valve and go down that line and get in here. And then when it goes to purge it, it'll cause it to stumble and cut up and idle rough and all that. George Baum and his wife came over here one day on their little Dodge truck that they had, and they said, sometimes when this thing is sitting here just idling, it'll all of a sudden just start idling rough. And so I plugged the scan tool in and I went to look at the purge, watching the purge. On the newer vehicle, starting with the OBD2, it may purge the canister anytime it decides it wants to. Years ago, they just purged it when you were into the gas, into the throttle, because they didn't want it causing any drivability problems. Well, for some oddball reason, the people that do OBD2, and I don't know what the reason was, you probably research it and find out. This little valve right here is subject to start going and pulling vapors out of here, and if it's pulling really heavy vapors that has some liquid droplets in it, all of a sudden you got more gas in there than you need. And if you're liable to run into this over where you're at, all of you are. Somebody's sitting here saying, and this lady called me one time, she says, I'm sitting at the gas station on my Windstar, and it's sitting here not a gas station, but at the red light, and it's just idling just perfectly good, and then all of a sudden it almost died, and then it surges ahead, and I almost hit the car in front of me. Yeah, I'm serious. It was bad, and the reason for that was because it started purging, and when it started purging, it slugged the manifold, and it almost killed the engine. And the PCM says, "Whoa, we lost RPM. We need idle air control." Boom, it opens up valve and all of a sudden. And so she just explained it to me on the phone, and I says, "Let me ask you this: do you pack your gas when you fill it up?" She goes, "Yeah, every time." I said, "Well, don't do that anymore." And that's what I told George. I said, "Stop doing that. Let it click off. You know, don't. I mean, I don't even. I try to round mine up maybe 10 cents. I'm not gonna go very far. You know what I'm saying? Because 10 cents nowadays ain't even 2 drops. You know, as far as that. So if you don't pack it in, you're probably not gonna have that trouble. So she
Mine
stopped
does that.
packing it in, and all of it went away.
Mine does that, and I don't pack it in. I just,
Well,
when
you
it
got other
clicks
issues.
off,
That is an old vehicle, and it's subject to have lots of problems. Now, that one over there, listen to this, the one they were working on yesterday, it does that. It would almost die, and then it would catch itself. What was it?
That rendezvous out there.
Yeah, not the rendezvous, the other one.
Maximum.
Yeah,
Maximum.
yeah. It had a crack in the air inlet tube, and he found that. When he took it off, that crack in the air inlet tube, it was sucking air in there that wasn't metered by the airflow, and it was causing it to do crazy stuff. So other things can cause that. Don't ever think that when I'm telling you something like that's the only thing that can cause it. You know what I mean? Don't think, okay, now I know what's wrong with Joe Blow's car. I mean, you got to still do your diagnostics, okay? All right, the catalytic converter gets its honeycomb coated. All right, that way. Evaporative system, hydrocarbons, that's number 5. Black smoke from the exhaust is a strong indicator of hydrocarbon emissions, and that's 1 of the 3. Hydrocarbon emissions, black smoke. It can also have raw gas coming out the back. You remember on that little SC300 I was talking about that was blowing raw gas out the back because it had an injector open all the time? All right, what actually happens at the molecular level when fuel burns? I talked about this earlier. Fuel unites with the oxygen. Anytime anything oxidizes, it's going to make something happen, basically. If a terminal, on an electric terminal gets oxidized, it's going to change colors and it's going to stop producing, it's going to get corroded. What about your car, your rusting automobile? The metal oxidizes, right? If you're cutting with a torch and you get that metal red hot and you pull that trigger on that torch, you got a steady, a real high pressure stream of oxygen that just blows that metal out of there. Like when you're cutting with a torch. That's oxidizing it, you're rusting it in two, basically. All right, now then, let's move here.
Fast speed.
Huh? Yeah, really high speed. What does the term stoichiometric mean? We've said that before. What is it? Stoichiometric, you see that word?
14.71.
14.7 balanced mixture for the cleanest combustion. Does alcohol produce more power and fuel economy than gasoline? Yes or no?
Yes.
No, it does not. As a matter of fact, you're not going to get the gas mileage off V85 fuel that you are. And you know this gasoline, the more alcohol they put in gasoline, the more it messes up lawnmower engines and stuff too. Eats those little diaphragms and stuff. Well, no, alcohol is actually they don't use they put something else in there to bring the octane up. But your ethanol fuel, 10% is not really going to hurt anything usually. They're trying to bump the ethanol levels up to 15% for some strange reason, and that ain't good for gas. Cars that are made to burn on gas, if you put alcohol in it, it's going to corrode things. It's going to cause wear to fuel pump. It's going to cause all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it does everything wrong. There's these people that are trying to come up with this don't realize what kind of problem we're getting ready to
You
cause.
put an article in Motor Age about that?
Yeah, it's been talked about by everybody on the planet that writes stuff.
They ain't figured it out yet?
Yeah, they figured it out, but there's some people that are making policy don't think about the big picture. During a combustion event, why does the ignition spark burn out while the energy is still available from the ignition coil? All right, let me show you what I'm talking about there. In a combustion event, if you look at a scope pattern, and this is something we're doing real quick here. All right, you're going along here. Your spark happens. That's your scope. This is the scope pattern. All right, this is the firing line. Is when it's jumping that gap, it's going to go, pop up here. It can be like 12, 15,000 volts, or it can be 5,000, 6,000 volts, whatever. All right, after it has jumped the gap, that thing continues to burn for a few milliseconds, and you're going to see a little table right here. But then, while there's still some energy left, it burns out, and it's like snapping a rubber band, and you're going to see squiggles like that right there. Those squiggles are energy that could have kept burning if something didn't happen to stop it from burning. So what happens? It runs out of gas. when there's gas in there, droplets that can burn, that spark stays there. When that gas goes away, you're typically going to, as the gas goes away, you're going to see an upkick right here, and then you're going to see it go down. So if you see that firing line going across here, you got an upkick as the oxygen goes away, the spark burns out, you got leftover energy. If you're looking at a scope pattern and you see one that looks like this, then you got a weak ignition coil, or you got not enough juice feeding your coil or something. But that's typically going to be a weak ignition coil. It should look like that. Firing line, spark line, there's your little upkick. And at Mac Vandenbrink, and we got time, I'll show you his PowerPoint. This guy's one of the sharpest guys on the planet when it comes to a scope. He can look at a scope pattern and tell you when the load rounded off on the camshaft. By looking at a scope pattern, that guy is really sharp.
He does what now?
He can look at a scope pattern and tell you if you got a rounded off lobe on the camshaft. Like if you got one that's running crazy and you don't know why, the scope pattern will tell. He can look at a scope pattern and tell you, we got everything we need, but we don't have the, rounded off lobe on the camshaft. He's in his little presentation that I got, real cool. He's a scope dope, really big time. More so than anybody I know, but pretty much. If an engine is running too hot, what harmful gas increases? Think too hot. What did I tell you? 2,500 degrees, right? All right. If it's running too cold, which gases increase? Think about it. It's running rich when it's running cold if the fuel system's working right? So you're gonna get HC and CO. All right. Now that's that one test. Let's do it.